All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just give a little introduction. My name is Casey Sampson. I'm the current president of Colonial Market Days and Encampment, Inc. That is a newly founded new profit here in Lebanon. It's an educational nonprofit. We are specifically looking and educating about the 18th century life and material culture of colonial America. So that's a lot of words, but basically think of the 13 colonies. But there was a lot more than what we know. And so our goal as an organization is to bring that education here. So in central Indiana, we don't have a lot of the amenities that the East Coast have. And so with events like Colonial Market Days and other events throughout the state, we can bring history back to life and put it right into your hands so you can see it, and smell it, and hear it, and be completely immersed into that time. So we have a board that's comprised of 6 individuals. Myself, Brian Hassinger, Scott Sparrow, who's here tonight. Most of our board is dressed. I was not, because I was in a meeting just prior to coming in here. But we also have Maya Hassinger, Eric Homkes in the back as well, and Abby, who is greeting you this evening as well. So tonight would not be possible without the very generous sponsorship from the Boone County Convention and Visitors Bureau. They gave us a very substantial grant to help bring the entertainment and different events to the event that's on June 8th and 9th at Abner Longley Park. And that's from 9 to 5 on Saturday and 9 to 4 on Sunday. But we've also had a lot of support from the Boone REMC, Lebanon Utilities, the Lebanon Parks and Recreation Department, and the City of Lebanon. One thing that we're excited for as an organization for the city is that we're actually able to bring in a lot of people from outside of Boone County and even outside of the state directly to the city. So that is a twofold benefit. It benefits us as reenactors, we get to see more people, but then for the city, which we currently reside in, it brings and grows the community as a whole. So also, with that, I am switching pages, as I am told, and I'm just going to introduce Parson John.
The young man does well, does exactly as he's instructed. Yes, indeed. Oh my! Well, I threatened earlier, perhaps, that I would preach. But just a little sermon? Please! But I know that you're here to hear my servant tell her story, so I'll not belabor the point. I'll call her up. Maggie? Maggie, don't make me have to call you again. Maggie!
Oh, yes, sir.
Get up here.
I was just doing my work back there, sir. I was busy working.
Yeah, you were sleeping is what you were doing.
Oh, no, sir.
That's why you're rubbing your eye. Well, Maggie, these folks have come to hear you tell your story of coming to this land. And I think I shall have you stand right here and do just that.
Oh, sir, that's such a hard story, such a sad one. Look how happy they are. We don't want to ruin their
We'll
evening.
fix that, yes.
Why don't we tell them some nice fairy tales, maybe from Ireland? Would you
Maggie?
like that instead?
No.
Or perhaps you'd like to hear some stories of our travels together. Woo! One time we were crossing the creek and he turns his ankle on a stone, and down he goes into the water and gets all wet, so he has to hide behind.
Not that.
Well, one time he was preaching in the meeting house, and when he's preaching, a little dog comes in and sits at his feet, and when he starts to sing, the little dog sings too. The dog sang better, I'm thinking.
I will brook no further delay. You will tell your story to these fine folks that have gathered here. Put your basket down.
It's a hard story, sir. It's hard to tell.
Maggie?
Yes, sir.
I'll be listening.
Yes, sir. You always do. Well, be it. Sláinte agus saoil go bhfuil.
Maggie, none of that Irish tongue of yours. Speak the good mother tongue of England.
Yes, sir. It's not any tongue of mine, mother.
Maggie,
I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling them that.
get on with it now.
Well, what I said to you in my own language was good evening, health and long life to all of you. Well, my name is Maggie, and you know that all right. And sure, and I'm from Ireland, and if you can't tell that by now, you've no more sense than a rabbit.
Maggie!
I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling them that. And you can also tell that I'm indentured to the master there. Well, I was born and raised in Ireland, True and Donegal, and married to a man named Robert Delaney while I was there when I was old enough. My Robbie was a good man, a fine man, a man that took pride in the work of his hands and everything he did, so he never stood ashamed before any living soul. Robbie was a tenant farmer. Sure, and I farmed a lot with him, you see, and it was hard work in them days. It is when you get your living from the ground. Hard on that man and beast. But isn't it true that the back of the slave would feed the belly? And though the days were long and the years were sometimes lean, and what man here doesn't know of those? Still, there was better times when we would sit before the turf fire in that little stone hut and have the sweetness of it between us because of it. Now, we didn't own the land we work. You see, in Ireland, none of us do. It's all owned by the great lords. And we have to pay a rent and a tithe in order to be able to live and work on it. And we didn't have much left after the paying, but no one else did. And we had what we needed most years, food to put on the table, a roof over our head, enough to keep the wolf away from the door, and that's all anyone needs to be contented, is it not? And sure, it wasn't all work and nothing else, for weren't we good Presbyterians? And there was always a wedding or a wake to be going to, and a fine time to be together with friends and neighbors. 7 children I bore to Robbie in the years we were there together, but 4 of them rested in the ground together, and only 3 were left alive to us. Colin was our oldest. He was a young, likely lad of about 10 summers old, with a thatch of wild hair and twinkles in his eyes, and a clap of his chin just there, like his pa. Britta was our golden child. She was 6 summers old, with hair the color of a sunset, eyes the color of a summer sky, and had a smile that would bring up the very, very sun up in the morning, or when she was her father's pride and joy. And then Colleen was the babe, and she was only a season old, but she was already the joy and the laughter of our lives. We were happy there and contented all together. We had no thought of ever leaving, especially to come here to your colonies, but you know, they say that the most sudden changes take place on the most unlikely of days. And isn't it true that it's only the good Lord himself who knows the twist and lay of the road in front of us? Well, Ireland is a poor country, made poorer still by England having her fingers in everything we does to keep us that way. But there come about a time that there was a crying out from the colonies here for the good Irish linen. You ladies know what I'm speaking of, don't you? Sure, it's the finest in the world. And you see, there was coin to be made because England had her own and didn't need ours. And so it started in the towns at first, and then it began to grow out into the countryside. And then that had the means was always looking for more land to be leasing and growing of it. And when they did that, it began to drive the rents up. Rack rents, they were called. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3 times as much as what the poor farmers had ever paid before. And when it did that, it began to drive the farmers off. And that's what it did to us. I remember the day that they brought the new lease for us to sign. And when they told us what the price was on it, more than double what we'd ever paid before. Poor Robbie tried to argue, but what do you say when you don't own the land yourself? And when we said we couldn't pay it, weren't they all in a grand hurry for us to get our things and get out? And they stood about in the yard that day as we gathered everything we could out of the house and carried it to the road. And then they burned our house behind us so we wouldn't go back to it. And I remember as I stood there on the road that day with my children at my feet and my things scattered about me in the road, I wondered what would become of us, for wasn't that the only life we knew? Well, I'll not tell you all the days that followed, what with us walking and walking and walking, and Robbie trying to find another land to lease or work, which wasn't to be had, and us selling everything we brought with us in order to be able to buy food. And we did that till we got to the town of Strabane, and there we stopped. You see, we'd already sold everything we had, and there was only a little food left, and no place to lay our heads but the ground to lay on, and the children weary and weeping and crying. In the morning, Robbie and Colin would get out and go into the town, and they would look for work to get coin to buy bread for one more day. And I would take Brenna and the baby and go door to door and knock and beg for a crust of bread, a bowl of milk, just anything to feed the children one more day. But the people there were poor as we were. They had little enough of their own and not enough to spare, and we weren't the only ones on the road begging. And so there was more than one night the children had nothing but tears to fill their bellies for sleeping. I remember Robbie and I were at the end of ourselves, not knowing what we were going to do. And then he comes back from town one day. Oh, he's all in a grand way. He's met a man, he says, in the town, who's an agent for a ship that's docked up at Derry, and it's going to the colonies and taking on passengers. And they'll take us to and give us food if we'll just make a mark on the paper that says that we worked for 4 years once we get there to pay our passage off. Work for 4 years, I say to him. And then what? Maggie, he says, we'll be free. Be free, says I. Free to do what? To starve like we're starving over here? No, Robbie will stay here in Ireland and do that. Little Maggie, he says, it's not like that. You see, over in the colonies, Maggie, the land is free. It's free. And when we get free, you and I will go and get some of that land and make a place and a home that no one can ever take away from us again. Now, my mother always said I have a Thomas kind of mind, because sure enough, food dollars. And I says to him, "Ooh, free land," says I. "Free land indeed. Robert Delaney, who's gone and put the stuff and nonsense in your head. No one gives land away for free. Me and Maggie, he says, it's true and for certain. The ship's man told me about it all himself, and he's got the look on his face of a good and honest man." "Ooh, does he not?" says I. "Well, there's often the look of an angel on the devil himself." Right. "Oh, I'm not saying so. I'm just telling him that."
Let's not be unkind.
"No, Robbie," I says to him, "no. I don't want to take my children and cross the ship to a land I don't know of. I don't want to sign my life away to another man that I don't know and put myself into their hands. We'll stay here in Ireland. You'll find land. We'll find work. You've got to have hope." I never forget what he says that day. For don't he lean over and look me dead in the eye, and he says, "Maggie, there's hope from the ocean, but there's none from the grave." And I look down at the faces of my children standing there, all hollow-eyed and quiet, and I see how their little faces are pinched and drawn up with hunger, and I bow my head. For don't I know that we've got to take whatever fate is held out in her hands to us, whether I want to go or no. And so back in the town we went that very day, and they took us to the magistrate, and there they drew up the indenture papers, one for Robbie, one for myself, and one for each of the two children, which I thought rather strange. But 6 and 10, they could do a fair amount of work. And 4 more years, they could do that much more. You've seen indenture papers, yes. You know what I'm speaking of. Are they French?
I did not think so.
Are you from the colonies? Ah, yes, it works. All right. They do this for yes and that for no. Have you seen indenture papers? No. All right, thank you. So now I don't be rattling on, sir. An indenture paper, they take a piece of paper about like that. And the indenture is a promise, a contract, between you and the person who's indenturing you. For us, it was the captain of the ship. And they write that promise between us 2 times, one at the top and one at the bottom, exactly the same. And then everyone signs it. The ship's man made a sign for the captain. The magistrate marked it with a red seal. That makes it legal. And then they made a place for us to make a mark, because see, none of us read or write. And then they take that paper and they cut it in half so that the master always has one and you always have one. But they don't cut it straight. No, they cut it in and out like this. So that when you pull it apart, it has great teeth that fit it back together again like a puzzle. And it's indented. That's why it's called an indenture paper. Ah, now see, you learned something, didn't you? I'm not saying sir, I'm just telling them that.
Don't forget your place.
Well, the ship's man took his parts of the papers, and then he took the others and handed them to my husband, and he says, "Here, Mr. Delaney, you hang on to these because they're important." Didn't I know they were important? Didn't I know when I put my mark on that paper, I'd sign myself away from Ireland forever? I knew we'd never be back. And then we followed the ship's man out the door and into the street again. But it was different. You see, when we walked in that door, we were our own masters, and we belonged to no one but God. But when we walked back out that door, we were nothing but a piece of property that belonged to another man. And that was a bitter, bitter moment. But the bitterness was made easier by the ship's man doing as he promised. He gave us food and victuals, enough to see us to Derry. And he says, "Now, here is the name of the ship, and this is when you need to be there to be on." And we left the next morning to walk there, and sure we had no reason to stay there anymore. And after walking many days, we came to Derry and went straight to the docks, and there was the ship, the Sally she was called. Oh, what a grand ship she was. And all the sailors climbing up and down and carrying things on and off to be bringing to the colonies. There was people there too. Fine people like yourselves. People that had paid a coin. You see, they were going to ride on the top of the ship and go over to a new land to start a new life, to find fame or fortune. But there was people like us there too. People driven out, starving, and making a mark on a paper in order to be able to find hope. We took our papers and showed them to the sailors, and they brought us on the ship and took us over to the ladder that went down into the hold. And they said, "Now get down in there with the other indentures and don't come back up again." And so we did. We went down the ladder into that darkness and misery that we would be in for the next 11 weeks. Have you ever been in the hold like that? Nah, you're fine folk. You rode on top, didn't you? Well, let me tell you what it was like for those of us beneath your feet. You see, the hold was a room down in the very belly of that ship. Oh, about as long, not quite as the room you're in now, but only as wide as the seats that are here in the middle. And it's only this tall, so that you can't stand up in it. You've always got to be down like this on your hands or knees or sitting. And by the time we sailed, there was 100 of us in there, mostly men, some women and children, whatever little things they brought with them. There's no portholes for light down there. The only light we have is from the ladder that goes up to the deck, but you're never allowed to go up there. No, you see, they're afraid if we get up on the deck we might mutiny, take over the ship, or throw ourselves overboard in the misery that we're in. Every day we were given a bowl of gruel or porridge, some stale ship's biscuits, maybe a piece of rancid meat, dried peas, a pint, maybe a pint and a half of water. The children got half of that. The baby got none at all. And down at the end of the room where the ladder was, down at the bottom of that, they put 2 buckets. That was for our waste, sir, for 100 people. And they were empty once a day. So you can imagine it doesn't take very long for what's in there to begin to spill over the sides of those buckets and mix with the swill of the water that you're sitting in. And as it crept across the room, it brought with it sickness and disease and then death. And before we had been at sea, even a fortnight, the very old and the very young began to die. And among them our own little Colleen. You see, I knew too well that my milk had dried up, and that the gruel they gave us had no strength in it for the babe. So when the fever came on her down there in the darkness, she didn't have the strength or will to fight it. and died of my arm there the second day. That wasn't the worst. The worst it was when the sailors came and took her little body from me and carried it up to the deck of the ship and threw it over the side into the water for a grave. You see, she didn't rest cradled in the arms of our homeland there with her brothers and sisters, but was lost and alone out in the wilderness there. She weren't the only one that died, though. Pity more it was the mothers who came on board the ship with their little ones still inside them, whose time came on them in the trip that we came across. Not one baby survived the birth. And all of the mothers but one joined their little one in the graveyard of the sea. I tell you, fine folks, that down there in that blackness was such a time of misery as you cannot ever imagine. Down where the air is so hot and stale that you can't breathe. And when you do breathe, you taste death on your tongue. Down in that darkness we sat and hear the rats chewing on dead and live alike and not knowing when you're next. Hearing the moans and the cries of the people that are there with you. And while you're down there and all of that, everything inside of you that makes a man, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your very soul dies. And you just sit there in that blackness and you wait for the end to come. However, whenever it does. But at last the day does come and the shout goes out that land's been sighted, and they sailed up the river and into the port of Philadelphia, and there we stopped. And they brought us up from below the deck and stripped off our rags because we were so filthy, and poured water on us and scrubbed us with the hard deck brushes trying to get the filth out. We were given old clothes to wear and stood up in a circle all around the top of the ship while they let the buyers come on and look at us. And they would walk by and look at you. They'd reach over and feel your muscles or open your mouth to look at your teeth. Sometimes they'd make you step out and walk back and forth to see if you're sound, just like you're a cow or a horse at the sails. Now some were asked if they could read or cipher, or did they know a skill or a trade, and for the ones that did, it went better for them, most. Some of the men they led on, they called soul drivers. You see, a soul driver comes on to buy a group or a lot of indentures and to take them outside into the countryside where they're needed and sell them for a profit over the 12 or 15 pounds he pays for them on the ship. Robbie and I were each bought by a soul driver together. We never thought that our family would all go together. That was what we'd been told. But that was not a truth. Because you see, our Colin and Brenna, our only two children still left to us, was each bought by a different person and taken away from us and off the ship. And I tell you, mothers, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to sit there and listen to your children crying out for you, and you not knowing where they're going, or who has them, or if you'll ever see them again. And I can still hear the crying of those children, the sobbing of their mothers as they're being taken away. The littlest having to be carried away, they're that little. And the babies that were left are the smallest of them all. They took them from their mothers and handed them over the side of the ship to anyone passing on the docks like they were unwanted puppies. I don't know where they are, my Colin and Brenna. I don't know if I'll ever see them again, but likely not. Because you see, that day we also found out that the papers that the children made a mark on doesn't hold them for 4 years like they told us, but hold them until they're 21. So at 6 and 10, I'm likely never to see them again. I don't know where they are. But the good Lord knows. And it was into His hands I had to place them because my arms weren't big enough to hold them anymore. No, really. Where those of us that were bought by the soul driver were taken off the ship and chartered through the town. South, I thought we went. And we would stop in every little town and every little village that we came by by, and the word would go out there were indentures for sale, and we would wait for a day or two while the men, and sometimes the women too, would come in and look at us. Now, Robbie was bought in one of the very first towns that we stopped at. He and a group of men that were bought to work on a large farm that a gentleman had. He was looking for workers for the field. But not me. There wasn't time for us to touch or to say anything to one another. There was only time for us to look. And in my eyes, I know there was anguish. And I couldn't stop the tears from flowing, but in Robbie's eyes, there was calmness and promise. And as they led him away from me, and I was watching him, he turned around one more time. And he smiled that devil grin at me that he had. And he nodded. And I know what he was saying. I knew exactly what he was saying. You see, he was saying, "Oh, to hell, Maggie. Oh, to hell. Courage. Courage, Maggie. We'll be together again at the end of the 4 years." My eyes watched him for as long as I could see him, and then he was gone. And I tell you, at that moment, I could have laid right down that floor in that road and died. Oh, I wish I'd never listened to that man. I wish we'd never started on this journey, because I would still have my husband and my children. I would still be in a place that I knew to call my own. But now I'm in a place full of strangers with nothing of my own. But as the days went by, the parting grew easier to bear. Time is a healer of all wounds, is it not? And I began to look ahead to the end of the 4 years, when we would be together and fighting our own land. Now, I was bought myself about a fortnight later by a man who was also looking for workers for the field. And I don't think he was very happy at buying a woman, and an Irish one at that. But that was too bad, because I was one of the best that was left, and so that's what he got. Now, my new master seemed to be a very wealthy man who wore fine clothes, and he rode a fine blood horse, had a carriage, and a beautiful house full of beautiful things. I didn't see those till the very end, but I heard that. He seemed to have a great deal of wealth in the town, because there were always people coming to visit him. Now, I will not call him a kind man, nor will I call him a generous man, but I will call him a fair man and a good enough master. As long as you did the work that he wanted you to do, and in the time he wanted it done, he was a good enough master and was not cruel or unjust in any way. But he had a fine kind of wife, who thought much too much of herself that was proper, and had a tongue so sharp he could clip a hedge. I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling him that.
I told you not to be unkind.
Yes, sir.
John.
She was a very difficult woman, more than made up for the fairness of her husband, and nothing was ever done that was right for her. Don't I see her little maids from the house all the time with their cheeks all red, where she'd slap them for not doing the work right, or not fixing the tea right, or not doing her hair right, or 1,000 other things. Oh, I tell you, all of us stayed out of her way, whether we were in the field or the house, to get out of the way of that tongue. More than made up for the fairness of her husband, she did. And proud? Whew! Vain and proud as a whitewashed pig. I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling them about that. Well, glad I wasn't put in the house with her. But I was sent out to the fields, and I spent my days as I had done many times in Ireland, going up and down the roads. Except that now, you see, I couldn't stop if I was tired. I couldn't even get a drink of water from my lips unless the overseer told me that I could. I found out quick enough. When I made my mark on that paper, I hadn't just signed my labor away. I'd signed my very body and soul away to someone else, and now I was in his control. We worked 6 days a week, from sunup to sundown. The Sabbath we had off, but we worked in the garden to grow our own food. Every night we were set out to sleep in 2 large sheds, one for the men, one for the ladies. That was to stay the temptation from between us. Wasn't that like trying to net fish with a ladder? I'm not saying, I'm just telling. Now, among my other servants that were there was those that was lazy and idle. And they spent more of their time trying to get out of the work than they did putting in the work that they did. And I wondered about that. But it didn't take me long to find out who they were. They were His Majesty's 7-year passengers. You know what I'm talking about? No. Oh, let me tell ya. They were the scum and the filth that were sent over by the king out of the prison so that he didn't have to take care of them anymore, to serve for 7 years. Ooh, there were pickpockets and rogues, debtors, and among the ladies, strumpets no less, brought their work and their foul diseases right along with them. Oh, they were a rough group to be sure, and every single one was suffering from a double dose of original sin. I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling. Well, all that sorry group did was talk about trying to get back to England. And sure don't I deny know what would happen to them if they made it all the way back and got caught a second time. You see, once you've been transported by the king, if you go back to England and get caught another time, there's no mercy for you. You'll be taking a trot on that three-legged mare.
English Maggie.
You'd get hung. But that didn't stop them from running away, and every now and then one of them would go running off. Ooh, what a hubbub there would be. The master would be sending out ads in the gazettes, and he would be sending out hunting parties, and the magistrate would be coming. Sometimes they got caught and brought back. And oh, when they did, they hung them out front on the whipping post and thrashed them so all of us could watch and see and learn a lesson from it, you see. And then the magistrate would be called, and they would take their papers, and they would add more time onto them for punishment. Not just for the time they'd been gone, but for any monies the magistrate or for the master had to pay to get them back again. Sometimes when they left, they had 7 years, and when they got back, they got 7 more. So now they had 14 to serve. But not all of them came back. And we didn't know if they were alive or dead. But oh, the tongues would wag around the fires of the night. And I heard blood-curdling stories about things that masters did to servants and all the things that they could do to you while they had you, no matter what the law says. They were probably just stories. Well, I was there for almost 3 years. And I spent my days to work for a mat to sleep on at night and a bite to eat. But there near the end of the 3rd year, the master himself got ill. And even though the doctors came and went, they could do nothing for him, and at last he died. And a day or so after he died, there were people that came from the town, fine men, merchants in fine clothes, to talk to the mistress, you know. I thought perhaps to say that they were for pity for her. But when they left, we could hear her wailing and weeping all the way out to our sheds, and we wondered at that. Now, if you're from Ireland, you know we have a saying, that dead men tell no tales. But there's plenty to learn in the wake house. And the talk of the wake house came out that the master had lived a fine and wealthy life, to be sure, but he lived it on the money of other men. And now that he was dead and gone, they were here to collect it, and there was none to be had. And so everyone and everything was going to have to be sold in the days to come to pay his debts. Now that was no harsh thing for us. For sure, I heard those stories. And the master had been hard, but not unkind. And now I faced a selling block, and who knew where I would go or what would happen again. And there was a great deal of fear for me. More than so when I was on the ship and didn't know any better than to be afraid. Well, the day came, and they had, a great crowd of people that had come from miles away to see the things for sale. And they sold us first, and then put us to the side and kept us there with overseers until the new masters would come and get us. And then they sold the things of the farm, and then they began to carry out the things of the house to sell. That's when I saw all those pretty things. And I look over, and the mistress is standing there wringing her hands and crying, and her little children are clutching at her skirt. And I'm thinking, now what's that poor woman going to do? She doesn't have a bed to lay her head on tonight or a lamp to light. I thought she was crying because all of her pretty things were going. But that wasn't it. For what do you suppose they do when they sold everything they could and there was still money that was owed? but to take that woman's children one by one and put them on the block and sell them as indentured servants. And no amount of sobbing by those children or crying by their mother stopped them from being sold till they were 21. I look over at the widow, and she's standing there with the big tears rolling down her face and sobbing and crying, and her children are sobbing. And didn't that bring back the old memory of my own children being taken away? And I looked over at that woman, and for a moment, sir, I felt a stir of pity in my heart. But it passed quick enough because I didn't care for the woman one bit. Well, with that, I thought it would be over. But before I could get my thoughts out of my head, the men who were owed the money went over to the mistress, and they began to talk to her. And before I know, they have her by the arms, and they're dragging her to the block. And she's screaming out, "No, no, no!" You see what it was? There's still money to be paid, and the only thing left to sell is her. Oh, how I laughed at that. We all did, and I know them little maidservants was really glad to see her put up in their place. And as they're putting her up on the block and her screaming and yelling, I'm thinking, well, now, Missy, it won't be so hoity-toity anymore for you tonight, will it? And I was glad she was being sold. God's true, sir, I'm not just telling this time, and I hope she got a mean master.
Maggie, you hold your tongue or I'll give you Sunday sermon twice again.
Oh. I've heard it 3 already, sir.
Maggie.
I think I could do it better.
Maggie. Get on with it.
Well, when they put her up on the block, a man in the crowd called out, "How many years? How many years do you sell the woman for?" And the man that was holding her said, "Sir, we can sell her for up to 39 years for what her husband still owes in debt." When he said those words, she shut her mouth and quit her squalling. And when it opened up again, the words that fell out, no fine lady ought to know. Whoo! Vulgar talk and street language shocked all of us, all of her friends and neighbors, into silence. Till I hear the little strumpets behind me start to snicker and laugh. And they whispered running around, and it came back to me. And you know what it was? That whether the master had known it or not, he bought one of those strumpets off the street and made her out to be a fine lady. And here she was, no better than the rest of us this whole time. Oh, how I laughed at that. And I look out, and here's all of her neighbors standing there with their eyes all bugged out like this and their mouths hanging open looking like a bunch of dumb sheep. And I wanted to say to them all so bad, what else do you expect from a pig but a grunt? I'm not saying, sir, I'm just telling you. Well, with that, the sale was over, and those of us that had been bought together in a group were led out to the road by 2 overseers. The master had gone on his way. And we weren't allowed to talk to each other, so we didn't know where we were going. But one of the pretty young things that was with us made up to an overshirt, and by the time the night came, we all knew where we were going. We'd been bought by a man who had a very, very large plantation, about a day and a half walk away. I won't tell you all about that place, because I've got tender ears in the audience and I don't want to sicken the ladies. But I will tell you that what hardship I thought I'd been through the 3 years before was nothing but a gentle journey compared to where I went now. You see, here it was. We worked until way before dawn, until long after the sun set. No place to sleep except for just the ground, and many times you laid down right where you were because you were too tired to find another place. Only the overseers took care of us. The master never came to the field, and they were cruel and hard men, carried whips in their hands, used them on anyone they wanted to, used any woman they wanted to without any fear of punishment. Here it was that I saw both male and female, slave and free, beaten to death as they lay on the ground. I saw some crushed to death beneath the things they were forced to carry. I saw some crawl into the woods and take their own lives so they wouldn't have to live in this misery anymore. And the ones that run away, well, they were almost always brought back. And when they were, they beat them out front until the back of their neck to the soles of their feet looked like nothing but a piece of bloody meat. And the ones that grew too ill to work, he put them in a wagon and took them into the woods, and we never saw them again, so that he didn't have the care of them. You see, here it was, I saw hardship. I saw cruelty done, man to man, that I had never seen before. I began to wonder if I would ever be able to live to make it to the end of my year that I had so that Robbie and I could be together again. For that's what I had to live for, was it not? But I'd not been there very long. When I was doing my work one day, thinking to myself about what it was I was in. And I felt the eyes of the servant next to me on me all day long. And it made me nervous, for I didn't know him. And finally he got up close enough to me to whisper, "Maggie Delaney, don't you know me?" And oh, what a start I had. For I'd not heard my name put together like that since leaving the ship. And I look at his face, and doesn't the dawning come? Sure, he was one of those fine Irish young men that sailed with us over from Ireland down that hole together. And glad I was to see him, the first I'd seen of my own. And I nodded at him and I smiled at him to let him know I was glad to see him. And as I work along, I'm thinking back to those days, and suddenly it comes to my mind that I think that he was sold with Robbie at that first place that we stopped. So I says to him, "Robbie, my Robbie, do you know him?" And he nodded his head. Oh, I thought my heart would jump clean out of my chest for joy. And so I says to him quick again, "Do you know where he is?" And he nodded again. But before my heart could take that second leap, he says to me, "Sure, and I do. Maggie, more's the pity. Your Robbie's been dead and gone these 2 years together." And I thought I hadn't hurt him right, and I get angry at him, and I say, "No, no, it's someone else you're thinking of. I'm talking to Robert Delaney." "No, Maggie," he says, "it's your Robbie I'm speaking of. I was there with him where we were. I was with him when he caught the fever. I was the one who helped to bury him, God rest his soul." I thought it took a blow at my chest. For sure it knocked the breath out of me clean, and my heart broke and fell out on the ground. And all of a sudden I go deaf and dumb to the world, and my legs won't hold me anymore, and I crumpled to the ground. Wild was my weeping, and as the world spun round and round, all I could think was, "Robbie dead. Robbie dead? No. We only had this much more time, and we were be together getting our own land." And I don't know how long I lay there on the ground, long enough for an overseer to see me. The first I knew of that man was the blow I took across my back, and then he pulled me to my feet and shouted in my face, and I know what he was saying. He wanted me to get back to work. But how could I? How could I? Wasn't everything I had to live for now gone from me? What hope did I have? What future did I have? I had nothing. I don't remember the rest of the days. Me trying to do my work with my eyes red and swollen with my weeping, and every step I took, every beat of my heart, the voice inside was going, "Alone, alone, alone. You've no husband, you've no children, you've no country, you have nothing left, Maggie, and you're alone." But one night, as that was pounding in my head, my heart answered back and said, "No, I have no husband, I have no children, but I still have a country. And I need to go home. Home is where I need to be." And the more I thought on that, the more the desire to go home grew into me, until one night my feet just picked me back up and I ran away. Oh, I was caught right away and brought back. But as soon as I could, I ran away again. Caught, brought back, and whipped again. But as soon as I healed, I ran away a third time. And this time I knew where I was going. You see, I wasn't just running willy-nilly. I knew I was going to go find the ocean. And in the ocean, a port, a ship that was going to Ireland, and I would get on no matter what I had to do. because I was going home. Back to my own. Oh, wasn't that like trying to send a goose on a mission to a fox's den? What a fool I was. I didn't even know where I was. I didn't know where the ocean was. And did I think that I was going to be able to cross through road and trail and not get caught a third time? And caught I was. But I made it much longer this time because, you see, I knew how to hide. But caught and taken into the little town that I was there and whipped by the magistrate and thrown in the jail to wait till they could find out who I belonged to. And as I sat in the jail in the filth and rats and the scum that were already there, I thought, Maggie, you are such a fool. You're not ever going home. You're not ever going to have nothing. And so I decided when I was taken back and whipped the way I knew I would be this third time, I decided I'd crawl off and find a way to take my own life because I had nothing left to live for. But as you can see, that's not quite what happened, is it? You see, the master sent back my papers to the magistrate, along with a note that said he wanted no more of a grieving Irish widow who couldn't do a day's worth of work and now had run away the third time. So he told the magistrate, do what you think is right in the way of punishment, settle for what you can get, and send that back to me. And that's what he did. The first thing the magistrate did was take my papers. And he sees that I've run away 3 times now. So he gives me 4 years for the first one, 4 years for the second, and 6 for the third. So now I've got 10 years plus my 1 to finish out. 11 total before I be free again. And then he took me out front and he had me whipped with the public whipping pole. 40 lashes less 1. That's the most that you can give a runaway, just like the good Lord took. And then when he'd done those things, he gave me one more gift. He gave me this. He gave me a metal collar, a neck ring, this is called. This is to show everyone that I meet my shame and my crime, and to make sure that I remember that I am not a real person. I'm just a piece of property to someone else. Then he took me had me taken to the auction, and there I stood at the marketplace and waited to be sold. Now all day long the people walked back and forth in front of me, but no one stopped and looked at me, and I don't blame them. Look what I'm wearing. Doesn't this mark me out for what I am? A criminal, a runaway. Who wants to be burdened with like that? And as I stood there and the day got later and later, the jailman that was with me began to call out a lower and lower price because I thought he was afraid he was going to have to take me back. So finally, long, long late in the day, I hear a long, low voice in front of me that says, how much? And I lifted my eyes off the ground just long enough to see the clothing of a common man, a wagoner, a man who makes a living by going here and there, place to place, taking deliveries, carrying goods from town to town. And because the jailman was afraid that he was going to have to pay out more than he wanted to, and he would lose the only man that he had, the only interest that he had, he began to call out and work on a lower price, and finally the deal was struck, and they signed the papers, and I had a new master. Now, as I followed the man across the marketplace, me wondering all the while, maybe because he was a common man like myself, he might be a common, kinder man, you think? Because he's like me. But when we got over to the wagon, he reached into the back of it and he took out a length of rope and he cut it. And he tied one in around my collar and he tied one in around the back of the wagon. And he says, now let's see you run away from me, missy. Walked up to the front where the beasts were that pulled his wagon, cracked his whip over their head, and we began to move off through the marketplace. Me still wondering, maybe when we get to know each other a little better, maybe he would prove to be a kinder man. But as we crossed the marketplace, some of the young lads that were there, seeing me tied like I was, thought it was great sport to pick up handfuls of stones or filth and throw them at me and see how I could dodge tied like I was. And you know what that beast of a man said when he saw them doing that? He threw back that great shaggy head he had and he laughed a great big laugh and he says, now be careful, boys, and don't harm the goods on the wagon. That was all the care he took of me. And as I followed him on out the town, I'm thinking to myself, ooh, Maggie, sure enough, the devil's got a brother, you've been sold to him. God's truth, I wasn't far wrong.
Maggie,
Oh, no, sir, I'm not saying.
I want you to tell them. They must understand that he is just such a man. Tell them. Make haste, but tell them.
Yes, sir. But this man was a cruel man, a hard man, a man that had a temper and a taste for strong drink to go with it. And he lived out alongside the river in a cabin with a shed out back for the beasts and a ring in the wall for me. 4 great oxen he had that pulled that wagon of his, and he loved them like children. And why shouldn't he? Weren't they the bread and butter for his table? Babies, he called them, my sons. And each and every one of them had a name and followed him around like great dogs when they were loose. He carried a big whip curled up in his hands. And when we would go, he would crack it over the top of their heads. But oh, we never touched them with it. No, you see, he was afraid that they wouldn't love him anymore to work. But he never worried about that with me. My name was never more than Winch or Hussy, or a few other names I'll not say with the ladies that are here. And every day, I felt the blow of that whip across my shoulders or my legs, or the flat of his hand across my face if I did something to displease him or if he just felt like it. This was the man I had to serve now. The man that I had to cook his meals and stand by while he ate, and he gave me only the scraps. The man that I had to help hook and unhook the wagon. The man that I had to help him load and unload it where we went places. And always to do whatever he said, whenever he said to do it. And everywhere we went, sir, tied by the neck to that wagon like I was a cur dog. Now the only thing he loved more than those beasts was a strong drink. And there was many a day that I sat crouched beneath that wagon, waiting for him to come out of an alehouse or a tavern. Now if the prophets had been good, he'd stay in there until his appetite was satisfied. And when he came out, he'd only have curses for me. But if the day was poor, if the credit was not enough, he'd come out far too early and he'd be so angry just looking for something to play on. And guess what he had to do it with? And I would be the one showing the bumps and bruises for it the next day. And I knew this is where I was going to die. Because didn't I find out that he killed the one before me already, and her just 19? Beat her to death because she couldn't keep up. What chance do I have? And as the days grow colder, and I grew weaker because I have nothing to wear but rags and no shoes for my feet, and I know that it won't be long before one day I won't be able to do what he wants, and in that temper he'll take away my life. But I didn't care. I didn't care. What do I have to live for now? What do I have? No husband, no children, no place, no home, no future. What do I have? Nothing. Nothing. I'd long ago given up whether I live or die. Well, the day comes. Oh, it was a day so cold and so wet, and there I was underneath the wagon, shivering and shaking. My teeth were chattering so I think if I'd set them together, my whole head would have rattled clear off. My feet were bloody and raw, cut and swollen from the ice I'd been breaking through in the road to follow him. And I was so weak I could hardly stand. The prophets were bad that day. And he came out far, far too early. And when he came out just looking for something to get a hold of, he got me. And he reached down and pulled me out from beneath the wagon and set me on his feet, slapped me in the face and said, "Now keep up." And he went forward to the oxen and called out, and we began to move off across the road. Me stumbling along behind, trying to stay on my feet, but I stumbled over and over, and I'd have to catch the back of the wagon to hold myself, to keep from falling down, because sure I knew if I ever went down, I'd never get up again. But at last I fell. I was just too weak. And I got drugged by the neck like this until he could get the oxen stopped. And when he came back and found me on my hands and knees trying to get back to my feet, all that anger came out at once. And he hit me such a blow in the middle of my back that he knocked me clean back down into the muck and mire of that road and the breath out of me, and there I lay. And I guess I didn't move fast enough. Because when I didn't move that quick, he began to kick and to beat and to scream and to knock at me and curse at me as I lay there. And I knew that this was the end. I knew he was going to kill me there. And I did the best I could. I tried to curl myself away, to dodge the blows, but I was tired. I couldn't. And so finally, I just gave up. And I lay there and let him do what he was going to do. And the strange thing was, is as I felt my life begin to fade out, and that flame of life that's in your breast, mine began to flicker and die down. I began to not feel the blows, or the pain, or the cold of the mud and the ice I was laying in. All of that disappeared, and I could hear, but I couldn't feel anymore, and it was as though everything was very far away. And as I lay there, I began to think about Robbie, and the dreams that we had, and the land we were going to have, and the home we were going to make together, the future we were going to build. And that it had all come to this. I felt such sadness. Well, just before everything went dark, I heard another voice, and then I heard shouting, and I thought perhaps it was St. Peter that had come for me. But then I felt and heard no more. I thought I had died, but when my eyes opened again, instead of seeing what I thought would be the pearly gates of heaven, I see a fire, and next to it a figure all in black. And I think, oh, Maggie, sure, it's the devil that came for you instead of St. Peter. But the truth of it was, is this traveling minister, you see, had been passing by and seen the wagoner beating at something on the ground. He crossed the road to see what it was, and when he saw it was a woman, he shouted at him to stop. That's what I heard. But I didn't belong to him, now did I? Whose was I to beat to death if they chose? And so he had to buy me from the wagoner to keep my life. And I've traveled with him since that day. Now for over 2 years, we've been together. And he's a good man. For a preacher. But he's not Presbyterian. And he's a generous man, for he bought me these fine clothes from a farmer whose servant had died. Of course, we don't know what she died of. And I've got shoes, but I'm not allowed to wear them till it snows, and it's too warm today. And he's a kindly man, for he's not lifted his hand to me one time in the 2 years we've been together, though I know he's been sorely tempted to do so. But he does preach at you something awful. And there are some men God never meant to sing. I'm not saying but you can tell by his clothes that he's a poor man. And so he tries to sell me everywhere we go. And so I never know where I'll be tomorrow, or what person I may go home with tonight. But it's all right. You see, my heart's come back up off the ground. And although I am not happy, I'm more contented than I was. Of course, there's every night when I sit before the fire and I look into the flames, that sometimes my heart and my mind take me back to Ireland. And suddenly I'm there again, sitting before my own turf fire in that little stone hut. My children are at my feet. My baby in my arms. And I look, and sitting there next to me is Robbie. The firelight is dancing across his face, and he's smiling that devil grin at me. His eyes are twinkling, just like they used to. And he's just about to say my name. And it's all I'm still alone. Oh, Robbie. Oh, Mama Reed, today.
Maggie,
Why did you leave me here?
Maggie. Hey!
Forgive me. I lost myself to you. 8 more years I have. 8 more years till this collar comes off my neck. And the papers that hold me bound to another man will be mine, and I will be free. And when that happens, I'll turn my feet, and I'll come out here to the land of the setting sun, because here the land is free. And a man and a woman can make a place in a home that no one can take away from them again. And I'll find me such a man that don't care what I am or where I come from or the scars I wear on my neck, but would be glad to have a woman like me to stand out here with them. And I do that, not for love. No, not this time. I do that so that on the day that my eyes close in death and they lay me here beneath the sod of our own land, I'll be able to look into Robbie's eyes. And I'll say to him, I did it, Robbie. I made it for the both of us. I have no more tale to tell these people, sir. I'm done. I'm done.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps this brings a question to mind that you would